The state of Penang, one of the most developed and urbanized Malaysian states, is located at the nation's northwest coast along the Malacca Strait. Unlike most Malaysian states, the history of modern Penang was shaped by British colonialism, beginning with the acquisition of Penang Island from the Sultanate of Kedah by the British East India Company in 1786. Developed into a free port, the city-state was subsequently governed as part of the Straits Settlements. Together with Singapore and Malacca, the state capital, Georgetown, briefly became the capital of this political entity between 1826 and 1832. By the end of the 19th century, Georgetown prospered and became one of the major entrepôts in Southeast Asia. During World War II, Penang was conquered and occupied by the Japanese Empire from 1941 to 1945. At the end of the war, Penang was also the first state in the Malay Peninsula to be liberated by the British, under Operation Jurist. The Straits Settlements was dissolved in the following year and Penang was merged into the Federation of Malaya. In spite of a secessionist movement within Penang, the merger with Malaya went ahead and the federation attained independence from the British Empire in 1957. Malaya later evolved into the present-day Malaysia in 1963. Following the revocation of Georgetown's free port status in the 1960s, the state suffered economic decline and massive unemployment. The state government at the time led a push to reorient the economy towards high-tech manufacturing, successfully recovering Penang's economy and lending the state its moniker the Silicon Valley of the East. Growing recognition of Georgetown as a bustling tourist destination, particularly since the city's inscription as a UNESCO World Heritage Site in 2008, also boosted the state's services sector, and today, both the manufacturing and services sectors are the two strongest economic pillars of Penang. Moreover, the state enjoys one of the lowest unemployment rates and Gini coefficients within Malaysia, as well as the second highest gross domestic product (GDP) per capita within the country after Kuala Lumpur. Ancient Penang. Evidence of prehistoric human settlement in what is now Penang has been discovered in Guar Kepa within Seberang Perai, formerly Province Wellesley, the mainland half of Penang. Human remains, dating back to about 5,000 to 6,000 years ago, have been found at the site south of the Muda River, along with seashells, pottery and hunting tools. These indicate that Seberang Perai had been inhabited by nomadic Melanesians from as early as the Neolithic era. Seberang Perai also became part of the Buyong Valley civilization. The Cheruk Tokun megalith in Bukit Mertajam, discovered in 1845, contains Pali inscriptions, indicating that an early Hindu-Buddhist political entity in what is now Kedah had established control over parts of Seberang Perai sometime between the 5th and 6th centuries. The entirety of what is now Penang would later form part of the Sultanate of Kedah up until the late 18th century. Meanwhile, Penang Island was first documented by Chinese sailors of the Ming dynasty in the 15th century. At the time, Ming Emperor Yongle was in the midst of launching naval expeditions that would eventually reach all the way to eastern Africa. The island, known as Bin Lang Yu simplified Chinese, Bin Lang Yu traditional Chinese, Bin Lang Yu was mapped by Admiral Zheng He's fleet in the nautical charts of Zheng He. One of the first Englishmen to arrive on Penang Island was the privateer Sir James Lancaster who commanded the Edward Bonadventure. He landed at Batu Ferringhi in June 1592 and remained on the island until September, pillaging every vessel he encountered. Penang Island was also indicated as Pulo Pinaume in Portuguese historian Emanuel Godinho de Heredia's 1613 map of the Malay Peninsula. In the early 18th century, ethnic Minangkabaus from Sumatra, led by Haji Muhammad Salah, also known as Nakota Intan, landed on Penang Island, establishing a seaside settlement at Batu Uban in 1734. They were followed by the Arabs, who subsequently intermarried with the Minangkabau. This gave rise to the Arab-Minangkabau admixture now described as Malay, as they have assimilated into the local Malay community. Founding of Penang. The history of modern Penang only began in earnest in the late 18th century. Up until then, the Sultanate of Kedah, which had control over Penang, had maintained turbulent diplomatic relations with Siam to the north. In the 1770s, the British East India Company instructed Francis Light to establish trade relations in the Malay Peninsula. Light subsequently landed in Kedah, which at that point was threatened by both Siam and Burma, as well as an internal Bugis rebellion. Aware of this situation, Light formed friendly relations with the then Sultan of Kedah, Sultan Muhammad Jiwa Zainal Abidin II, and promised British military protection. As part of his promises, Light assisted in the quelling of the Bugis revolt by recapturing a Bugis-held fort for the Sultan. The Sultan reciprocated by offering Penang Island to Light. Light subsequently wrote to his superiors regarding the offer, arguing that Penang Island could serve as a convenient magazine for trade, and its strategic location would allow the British to check Dutch and French territorial gains in Southeast Asia. He also made the case that, with the other ports in the region, such as Aceh and Phuket, riddled with piracy and despotic governments, the British East India Company could seize the opportunity to establish a tranquil harbour on Penang Island conducive for free trade, noting that if Malay, Bugis and Chinese will come to reside here, it will become the exchange of the East if not loaded with impositions and restrictions. However, nothing transpired until 1786, when by that point the British were fighting the 13 American colonies, which were backed by France and the Netherlands. Faced with the Dutch dominance of the East Indies, now Indonesia, and a growing French threat, Light, who by then had risen to the rank of captain, was ordered to acquire Penang Island from Kedah. The British East India Company sought control of Penang Island as a Royal Navy base, and a trading post between China and the Indian subcontinent. Light negotiated with the new Sultan of Kedah, Sultan Abdullah Mukarram Shah, regarding the cession of Penang Island to the British East India Company in exchange for British military assistance and a lease of $6,000 to cancel Kedah's debts to Siam. With the agreement between Light and the Kedah Sultan successfully concluded, Light and his entourage sailed on to Penang Island, where they arrived on 17 July 1786. Fort Cornwallis would later be built at the spot where Light first set foot. The area where Light first landed was originally a mangrove swamp covered in thick jungle. Once enough land was cleared, creating what is now the esplanade, a ceremony was held on the 11th of August, during which the Union Jack was raised for the first time. This signified the formal possession of Penang Island by the British East India Company in the name of King George III. The island was renamed the Prince of Wales Island after the heir to the British throne, while the new settlement of Georgetown was established in honour of King George III. Thus, Georgetown became the first British settlement in Southeast Asia and a springboard for future British territorial expansion in the region, while its establishment by the British East India Company marked the start of a period of British imperialism in the Malay Peninsula. Unbeknownst to the Kedah Sultan, however, Light had acted without the authority or consent of his superiors in India. When Light reneged on his promise of British military protection against Siam, the Kedah Sultan in 1791 assembled an army in what is now Seberang Perai to retake the Prince of Wales Island. The Sultan's force was also assisted by a fleet of pirates. Fortunately for Light, his garrison on the island was reinforced by 2 companies from Calcutta. After failing to persuade the Sultan to disband his forces, the British East India Company launched amphibious assaults at night, destroying Kedah's military installations in Perai, and defeating both the pirates and the Sultan's army. In 1800, the first Lieutenant Governor of the Prince of Wales Island, Sir George Leith, gained a 189.3 square kilometres (73.1 square miles) strip of Seberang Perai from the Kedah Sultan and renamed it Province Wellesley. The newly acquired land covered an area south of the Perai River, turning the river into the international border between the British-controlled Province Wellesley and Kedah. At the time, Province Wellesley was heavily forested and sparsely populated, with a total population of only 5,000. In exchange to this acquisition, the annual payment to the Kedah Sultan was increased to $10,000 per annum. To this day, the Malaysian federal government still pays Kedah, on behalf of Penang, $10,000 annually as a symbolic gesture. Following the original acquisition in 1800, Province Wellesley was gradually expanded up to its present-day boundaries in 1874, when the Pongkor Treaty, which included the delineation of Province Wellesley's southern borders, was signed between the British and the neighbouring Sultanate of Perak. Light died from malaria in 1794 and was buried within the old Protestant cemetery in Georgetown. To this day, Light is honoured as the founding father of Penang. Early growth. Francis Light had established Georgetown as a free port, thus allowing merchants to trade without having to pay any form of tax or duties. In effect, this measure was intended to entice merchants from the Dutch ports in the region. As a result, the number of incoming vessels increased exponentially from 85 in 1786 to 3,569 in 1802. Georgetown's population had also risen to 10,000 by 1792. Immigrants came from various parts of Asia. In 1801, the then Lieutenant Governor of the Prince of Wales Island, Sir George Leith, remarked that, "There is not, probably, any part of the world where, in so small a space, so many different people are assembled together or so great a variety of languages spoken." A committee of assessors was also established for Georgetown in 1800, making it the first local government to be established within British Malaya. The Prince of Wales Island, together with Province Wellesley, had been administered under the Bengal Presidency until 1805, when Penang was made a separate presidency on par with Madras, Bombay, and Bengal. By then, Penang also served as a penal station. In 1796, 700 Indian convicts were shipped in from the Andaman Islands. The practice of employing Indian convicts continued throughout the 19th century as a means to provide the necessary labor for public infrastructure works, such as the construction of roads, drains, and public buildings. In 1807, a royal charter to provide for the establishment of a Supreme Court and a police force in Penang was granted. The Supreme Court of Penang was first opened at Fort Cornwallis in Georgetown in 1808, with Edmund Stanley assuming office as its first recorder judge. In the decades that followed, Penang's judiciary and the police force were progressively applied to the Straits Settlements, and later copied throughout British Malaya. Hence, Penang was the birthplace of the present-day Malaysian judiciary system, as well as the Royal Malaysian Police. In the early 19th century, Penang became a centre of spice production and trade within Southeast Asia. The cultivation of pepper began soon after the founding of Georgetown in 1786. The production of spices, including nutmeg and clove, gradually grew more varied, and the booming spice trade led to the opening of spice farms all over Penang. The export of spices through the port of Penang also enabled the British East India Company to cover the administrative costs of Penang. Furthermore, the agricultural plantations would fuel the growth of several villages, such as Air Itam and Balik Pulau on the island, and Bukit Mertajam in Province Wellesley. Malay refugees fleeing the Siamese invasion of Kedah and Chinese immigrants formed the bulk of workers in these agricultural estates. Other areas, such as Bayan Lepas on the island and Kepala Batas in Province Wellesley, were founded as rice-producing estates. Straits Settlements. In 1826, the British East India Company amalgamated the territories of Penang, Singapore acquired from Johor in 1819 and Malacca acquired from the Netherlands in 1824 into a single political entity, the Straits Settlements. Georgetown was made the administrative and judicial capital of the new entity. However, owing to Singapore's more strategic geographical location between the Malacca Strait and the South China Sea, the port of Singapore rapidly surpassed the port of Penang as the preeminent harbour.